Folks!
Folks, my name is Rudy.
Welcome back. You guys been wanting me to make this update video. I'm finally catching up with things going on. Thought it'd be a good time to finally discuss high seas. It's come out. It's over with. And boy, is there a lot of hootenanny. Boy, is there a lot of hoopla and drama and conversation going on. Alright, so first, for those of you who don't know what the hell I'm talking about, so Flesh and Blood's newest set came out, called High Seas. There's a lot of controversy, a lot of positive, a lot of negative, a lot of power in the set, some expensive reprints in the set, controversy in the set, no cold foil fable, all the cold foils are in the little golden pack, not in the draft packs. There's a lot of anger and emotion that I'm not sure if Flesh and Blood's going back to the cheap Gamepiece business model anymore. So, where are we at? We are a couple weeks after High Seas release. It was incredibly successful. Well, I guess if you're a patron, I guess you can message me. I think I have 8 High Seas kits left. I'm going to keep 1 or 2 for box opening videos, so I may have a couple if you're watching this, but if this video's been out for more than a couple hours, I assure you they're probably gone already. Well, High Seas boxes in the open market in the United States are about $140 to $160 a box, maybe $170 with tax, depending where you live. Prices are not dropping. Single cards, aka the cards in the set to make your deck to use as pieces to play the game, are quite expensive and quite desirable, and the economy and the market of Flesh and Blood is extraordinarily robust right now. There's been a very clear, hard pivot in the last 6 months, or in 2025, on the direction of the print runs and management and supply of this product, specifically in the United States. Now, some of you out there who are probably newer to this channel and newer to Flesh and Blood, it is an absolutely hardcore, incredible game to actually play. The actual seriousness, the competitive scene, the organized play network, the tours, the pro tours, the worlds, the whole thing, and of course at your local armory, at your local LGS. It is an incredibly robust little world. I would say the player base and people involved right now of Flesh and Blood, or at least in the United States or maybe around the world, I'd be willing to say it's got to be, low side, 25, 50,000? High side, maybe 100,000 people. It's a lot of people, but I mean, it's not, Pokemon where it's like tens of millions, but it's doing quite well. And the reason I just name dropped a little Pokemon comment is that's where I want to start this video. When Pokemon, just follow me, trust me, just trust me. When Pokemon left Sword and Shield in the pandemic and all these things, we went to Scarlet Violet in the last few years. Well, Scarlet Violet was rejected by the market, and the internet and the social media machine was very angry at Pokemon and Scarlet Violet for overprinting. Now, of course, as with all corporations and businesses and entities and enterprises, Pokemon eventually, usually slow to react. The bigger the company, the slower it is to make big changes. Well, Pokemon started cutting print runs. In the first major print run, reduction started by time Scarlet Violet SVO5 hit. It was generally accepted that SVO 1, 2, 3, 4 was printed too much and was why the bear market in Pokemon happened. Now, ironically, by the time the bear market ended and Pokemon went insane, was around SVO 6. But by the time the Pokemon Company had started to throttle back the print run, it was SVO 5. So by the time the company had made changes in the world of Pokemon, the market started to expand, and the player base and collector base and evil investor base started to grow again. Now, of course, the Pokemon Company just cut production and supply on SVO5 and moving forward, SVO5 and 6 range. At the exact moment they were cutting and finally moved forward with that, the bull market took place, the player base expanded more, everything went crazy. Pause. Now we get to Flesh and Blood. Most people watching this video today were not around 3, maybe 4, maybe even 5, maybe the 5.5 years ago when Flesh and Blood started. Okay? And since Fab 2.0 was announced and engineered by the company, well, most people playing today don't know any different. So price memory and behavior is used to a certain type of battlefield and a certain type of secondary market. Well, in 2025, in the last 6 months, Flesh and Blood has really done things that nobody expected. And yes, we're going to go into some of the internet's talking points, and we're going to comment on some things, and some of you all going to be very angry about it, and that's okay, because it just needs to be discussed. You can use Rudy as the bad guy. Just pick somebody. Just be nice to your LGSs and be nice to the employees that are just there trying to, help the store. And remember, for the last couple years, it was a generally accepted thing in the United States that Fab 2.0 says the market believed they were severely overprinted. That was the general consensus of the internet, the talking points, and essentially LGSs and distributors and kind of the chatter on the street in the United States market. Everything we're discussing is US market. I am not familiar with the Japanese market, Singapore, different Asia Pacific countries, New Zealand, Australia, Europe, South America, Canada. I am specifically referring to good old United US of A. So based on that, everybody was learning that, when Flesh and Blood sets came out, they were usually pretty successful, even though, of course, bright lights, overall, they were pretty stable and successful. Now, the frustrating part was whatever didn't sell on the sealed product conversation within the first maybe 90 days of a Flesh and Blood release usually would become what they call toxic or dead inventory. And it became this a very bizarre situation that was isolated. Well, no, it wasn't isolated to Flesh and Blood at the time. Because in 2022, 2023, every Magic set was coming out and just tanking because post-COVID side effects, and we had garbage management in Wizards of the Coast. So essentially, people were angry that if you didn't sell your Flesh and Blood sealed boxes in the local LGS or online on eBay or TCG Player, whatever, after the first few months, the demand essentially went to zero. And then they would layer that with a level 2 little layers. Well, some bad thunder and weather coming. Jeez. And then on top of that, people would just say, well, of course, because eventually the heroes in the set get living legend status. Essentially, all the heroes become banned, and the cards go to zero, and everything in the Flesh and Blood can't age well like other CCGs because of the way living legend and the way cards, heroes, and products age. There was this overall attitude towards it. Well, fast forward to today. Things are different. Not only are they different, they're very aggressively shifted. Far more aggressive than I ever thought was going to happen, but they did it. The company did it. Management did it at LSS. Now, whether that was the world famous James White, that everybody knows his name kind of guy, was it a board meeting director? Was it an executive? I don't know the details of that kind of thing. That's an internal company thing. I'm not privy to that. I don't know. And, the company clearly made major changes, because when markets go through a substantial change, you can tell because there's a knee-jerk reaction, because nobody expected it. Hence why the pricing is more aggressive and things are more intense than they normally would be if there was a track record of this. Because there was no recent history of Flesh and Blood doing this, the LSS had no recent data and no recent pattern of behavior showing that they were going to do these things in 2025. Therefore, the market wasn't prepared. The market didn't make moves in advance. The market didn't do things expecting this shift to happen. Now, pause there. When we go to Magic, everybody loves Final Fantasy. I grew up with it. I was obsessed with it. I knew it was going to be a big deal. I knew it was going to be expensive as shit. I knew the prices were going to go through the roof. Same thing with Pokemon. I knew eventually the next wave of Pokemon bull market, things would get crazy expensive. Everyone gets emotional. Again, there's every part of a market cycle is connected with a certain type of feedback loop on the internet. Social media has a very predictable behavior pattern depending what kind of market we are swimming through. Flesh and Blood is a little different because the market never actually thought the company would be balls deep this aggressive. Rudy, Florida man over here, who has to literally dodge alligators to make sure I stay alive every day of the week, I did not think the company would actually be this hardcore. I mean, again, you're talking to a guy where all of that is me buying Monarch from the public at $200 a box. If you were around 4 years ago, you remember that because Monarch was $500 a box or $400 a box. So I thought buying at $200 a box was a good entry point for long term so I could do future sales and things with patrons. I was wrong. So you run into these things where the future, when the market catches you off guard, in the market, when things happen that are not what analysts expect, things get pretty, I don't want to say violent, but things get pretty emotional. Okay? Now, so here we are. So now that we've kind of laid this framework of conversation, well, the Hunted is like, what, 150 a box? 130 a box? High Seas is brand new. It's around 150 a box, maybe higher. And there's absolutely no data or signs of anything tanking in price. Well, the only reason we would get a huge decline in pricing on the Hunted or High Seas is if the company decides to either reprint, release, come up with, or have product enter the US, whether they have it or reprint or whatever, and they bring more product to the market. I still get hundreds of patrons who didn't buy the Hunted because they thought, Rudy, I'd stop buying your Flesh and Blood kits because I just would wait a couple months after release. I'd go on TCG Player and just buy it at 50 cents on the dollar below MAP pricing. So I stopped buying your stuff. So see, that right there, that is the important moment here. People had a predictable behavioral pattern based on what they expected to happen. And then when something clicks and shifts really quickly, a lot of people get caught with their pants down kind of thing. A lot of people get caught in a situation where they have a pattern of how they acquire or how they navigate a market. And then when that pattern abruptly ends, you get volatility. From what it looks like to me, at least, it does not appear they're going back to reprint any additional sets. It does not appear LSS is allowing distributors or anybody, including any of the two major distributors in the United States, or even other little side people like me, it doesn't appear they're allowing anyone to get random additional waves of supply, reprints, pallets, or anything. That does not appear to be a thing at all. It doesn't matter who you are. It could be one of the big two distributors in the U.S., you could be a creepy Rudy, Florida guy. You could be any partner. You could be any LGS. You could be hosting all kinds of armory events every day of the week. It doesn't matter who you are. It seems to be just a flat, firm thing. So, the downside of that, the Gamepiece conversation is long gone. The colored foils, the chase cards, the legendaries, the fables, the marvels, the more expensive variants of extended arts and different cards are becoming very, very expensive because Well, they are truly chase cards, hence the term back in the 90s and early 2000s, chase cards. Well, you have to chase after them. They are tough to find and they are historically expensive. And of course, when you go into this type of market and you do this, you are now going to be met with the internet attack, anger, hate mob. You are now going to be hit with the quote unquote, I'm quitting your game. You are now pay to win. And who can afford $2,000 Type 1 Super Net Meta decks? Who can afford this? You are now going to be presented with new conversations. Because the way a collectible card game works, a TCG, CCG, any of these terms you want to use, if you are making a product that contains randomized cards in a pack, you have to have a secondary market that's healthy. But the problem is, the stronger, more expensive, and healthier the secondary market is, the more the other side of the teeter-totter, the player base, the Gamepiece army, the people who just simply want to play the game and believe money is stupid in this world, and they're very anti-capitalist usually, not always. You have two sides. Now, of course, you're always going to have outliers and exceptions, but the more expensive and the more strong the secondary market, the distribution model, the LGSs, the single card sellers, the evil flippers, the basement dweller Rudies, the closet investors, the little Rudies, the more that side of the teeter-totter buffs up, the stronger that gets, the more the other side of the normal player who wants everything to be cheap as possible is going to get angrier and angrier and more vocal on the internet. So then you eventually hit the ultimate pivot point, which is where I think Flesh and Blood either is as of the filming of this video or over the next 90 days. And that is, what does the company do for the rest of the year? What does LSS do? Do they take the loud voices of social media and the loud people on the internet posting their I quit letters and F you James White and screw LSS and Flesh and Blood is dead to me? Does the company listen to the very loud internet social media voice of negativity? And do they change the direction of an entire multi-million-dollar company because you're going to take some select very loud voices on the social media machine? Or do you try to recalibrate and try to balance? Right now, you have the happiness of the player base and Gamepiece people probably near an all-time low. The other side of the teeter-totter, we have all-time high strength in the secondary market, distribution, LGSs across the United States are begging for product. Stores that didn't even carry Flesh and Blood. They skipped 3, 4, 5 sets of Flesh and Blood. Sound familiar? How many stores skipped Magic sets in the bear market? How many stores were skipping Pokemon sets in the bear market when people were making fun of and attacking and death threats and nasty messages and F you Rudy during the Pokemon Scarlet Violet SVO 123? When I was buying all this shit and I'd run sales to patrons and everybody told me to F off. So you have all these moving components. And again, depending where the market is, you can get a feel by, well, you all watching the video. We can tell where people are at. So, that's where we're at right now. Mega strong secondary market. Collectors are loving it. Investors are begging for product. People are opening boxes of high C's left and right. They're flipping singles. They're keeping some reserve boxes because it's a special thing. And of course, you have the very angry pitchfork. Why are the cards expensive? I can't afford to play Flesh and Blood anymore. I'm forced to quit the game I love. And it's all LSS's fault. That's where the current... See, that's where we're at. But what's the most important thing is what happens next. Does the company backpedal, increase print runs substantially, bring prices back down? Do they create new pieces of gear that are a good alternative to running the Tunic? Do they have new cards that are an alternative? Doesn't have to be better, but a different play style or a different direction for a tier 1 deck instead of running Command and Conquers or Tunics or I don't know, whatever the new Fabled is. I guess people said the new Fabled is playable and everyone's angry. So you have so many complex things. But what I see happening is the fact that the angry voices are so passionate about Flesh and Blood. They are willing to post and reach out to the company and say these things. That is how much love and passion there is for this game. And again, we're past 5 years on Flesh and Blood. This thing ain't going anywhere. Like, this isn't a fly-by-night thing. And you gotta remember the early days of Flesh and Blood, which is, I guess, the first 4.5 of the 5 years. The internet, every time we'd make a video like this, the views would be, 1,000 views, 2,000 views max. Everybody would just in the comments section would just be, no one plays this. I went to my local LGS in the middle of Alaska. There's 3 penguins, and none of the 3 penguins are playing Flesh and Blood. This game is fake. You would always see the goofy people that would go to an LGS, and there'd be 10 people there. And because they weren't playing Flesh and Blood, they would go on the internet and say, see, no one plays this game. There's just a lot of people that don't understand the size of the world and the scale and how big the planet is, maybe. I don't know. There's just a lot of less than desirable educated humans on this planet. So that's kind of the basic conversation right now. Now we can get into a few other things. The frustration on the Majestics, the difficulty to get a playset of Majestics, Now remember, Flesh and Blood is 3, not for all of my Magic fans. Remember, Magic is 4, Flesh and Blood is 3. When I say playset, I mean 3. A lot of people are frustrated about the pull rate of Majestics. And a lot of these Majestics, especially generics, are required cards, as people would say, on any of the hero decks. So there are certain cards and certain slots that are being demanded and pulled on by all types of heroes and classes. And there's a lot of people that feel that that's why the game's not designed. It's the balance and the power level. And the most recent, and then of course, people just say flat out, they're making the power level too high in the most recent Flesh and Blood sets, causing the other sets, Outsiders, Bright Lights, even Heavy Hitters, these sets are too weak now because of the new power level. And of course, Mist Veil, oh, here we go, every hero is going to be banned and legendary this, and see, now the boxes are worthless. And so you have these internal conversations in internal, I don't know, like unsolved Rubik's Cubes of these things. Like, how do you handle the long-term health of a game, your sealed product value, your single cards, your reprint policy? How do you navigate this many variables but keep the game fresh and rotating and all these things? But what, because the argument is, the non-Gamepiece player army, the people who just believe in collectors, business owners, sellers, single sellers, sealed product people, just everybody in that category doesn't want endless amounts of boxes crushing the market. In 2025, the entire conversation of map pricing has gone away. At this point in time, LSS might as well put on their website, map pricing doesn't exist, we don't care anymore. Because it's never, on the direction they're going, map pricing is never even going to be a convert. Like, it's so funny how 2 years ago, the entire internet in all the stores and LGSs and distributor, all the conversations were, hey, Rudy, I discovered Flesh and Blood from you from 5 years ago, but, I went to my LGS and they got threatened. Now they got banned by LSS at my store because they were selling below map on TCG Player. And if they don't sell below map, they couldn't move their products. So they just stopped carrying Flesh and Blood. Well, all of a sudden, with The Hunted in High Seas, it's the first time that my LGS locally has been carrying Flesh and Blood. They skipped 4 sets. So when I hear stuff like that, I'm going, okay. So suddenly, stores that stopped carrying it, everybody's starting to carry it again. That's a tough argument to go against. And then on the other side of the coin, now you have the players. Well, I can't afford to play this. I can't pay $2,000 for a deck filled with, expensive Majestics and specialty legendaries and a play set of Fables, and I can't afford a $2,000 deck. So you have new types of problems because now you have different types of success. This is why it is incredibly important to have very sharp financial people. Look, if you don't think Wizards and Hasbro and Pokemon, if you don't think Bushy Road, you don't think any of these companies have financial people working, monitoring the secondary market, calculating the value of singles and boosters and packs and rare. If you don't think these companies have whole teams of this stuff, then man, you're in the wrong industry. You have no idea what's out in this world, folks. Like these companies, the amount of effort and caution and design and financial impact that is put into these products on price points and calculation is beyond what most of us can comprehend. They spend hours, if not hundreds of hours, and have teams of people that focus on this stuff. And of course, people say, "Oh, these are just cards. They should have no value. They should be a quarter." It just blows my mind. Just the lack of. You don't have to agree with it, but I want people to understand that this is what goes on. It's okay to not agree with something, but it's important for the human brain to understand it's a real thing. You don't have to like it, but pretending it doesn't exist or not acknowledging why it exists is a very flawed outlook for the future, the present, and understanding the past. Okay? And right now, I think it's really tough for a lot of people to understand that the flesh and blood from 2 years ago and the ability of endless stores and distributors having tons of boxes and products and being able to get boxes in stores. You're not getting boxes for $50, $60 anymore. You're not going to find LGSs around the country that are still sitting on these dead flesh and blood boxes that nobody wants. That's not a thing anymore. It's gone. It's over with. The future in time has taken care of this. Management has taken care of it. They have shifted the course of the ship. And I encourage people to be careful thinking that because you read on a social media platform, whatever website you're looking at, that somebody is unhappy or quitting the game. Just understand, folks, the current problems with flesh and blood that the public believes they have is probably the best set of problems you can have as a company moving into the future. That's the LSS and Flesh and Blood's problems right now are a beautiful thing. Because the people who are angry are upset because they love the game and they can't get enough of it because it's expensive. That's the level of problem. Stores and distributors and people selling the cards and singles and anything are literally just so obsessed with trying to get the product because it's truly collectible. And that's creating a whole different dynamic that our brains and our price memory are not used to. And yeah, it's difficult to shift. Now, I'm not going to do more comparisons on Magic and Pokemon because I think some of it's relevant. But I'm trying to stay on just kind of what's going on with this. Like I said, the problems and things of shifting on Fab 2.0 and the things that the company started re-engineering and changing was a very big risk the company took. I was always very skeptical of it. Even LSS knows I was not even a fan. I was like, I don't think you should get rid of the first edition Unlimited. I just think everything needs to be kind of tweaked and modified how it's done. But, they took a huge chance. The company, they developed the first edition Unlimited Edition. And then the company developed a new path when they didn't like what happened with that business model. I didn't do any of that. I gave my opinion on it. My opinion didn't really change what they were doing. But this was all developed by the company, by James, and by, the last 5 years of management. And, a lot of it, there were some scary times because I was like, I don't know if that's better or going to work at all. And here we are. 5.5 years later, a lot of turbulence, a lot of macro issues, a lot of economic issues. The COVID era, pandemics, bear markets. And over 5 years later, there's one thing we can all agree on. the company tightened the print runs. The player base is expanding. And the sell-through rate of single cards and sealed product and what's out there, it's a very strong market. And now, since everybody knows this is why, I'll end the video here. This is why moving forward, it makes it almost more scary, because now everybody knows the next Flesh and Blood set you need to pre-order and go crazy on. Everybody knows. Okay? Everybody already knows this. So now, in 3 months from now, when we go into, I don't know what, August or September, whatever it is, we get the next Flesh and Blood set later this year. When those pre-orders open, every LGS who watches this channel, who's aware of what's going on, suddenly all these other LGSs who haven't ordered Flesh and Blood, or maybe they skipped 3 or 4 sets, all of a sudden all these other LGSs are going to be requesting Flesh and Blood cases. And of course, the people who are hardcore Flesh and Blood people are going to be requesting more cases. And so now, because the company has rewired how everybody views new releases of Fab, it's going to change the behavior of pre-orders and demand. Okay? And I'll give the example. Wizards of the Coast, when they cut the print runs on collector boxes, well, for the longest time, that's the reason I have so many collector boxes I don't think anyone else out in the United States has more sealed collector boxes of Magic the Gathering from the last 5 years than I do. Because I was the only dumbass buying them and still staying the course when everybody just ripped me to shreds and just made fun of me like I was Captain Timmy. For me, I've told you guys in the other video, I've never skipped a Flesh and Blood set. I've never skipped a Magic set. There's never been a time I emailed LSS and said, hey, no, I'm skipping the Flesh and Blood set. I know you got a big set coming, I'm skipping the whole set. Don't give me any, like that's never happened. Good markets, bad markets, whatever. Sometimes the orders were different. Maybe instead of 6 pallets, the shipment was 5 pallets. Or maybe instead of 7 pallets, there were 6 pallets. Like, there were some shifts like that. But that's, I don't consider a plus 10, 20% up or down. That's just going through market cycles of risk and tolerance. I've never skipped a set. So, and there are LGSs out there that they've never skipped a Flesh and Blood set. They've never skipped a Magic set. And well, in times like this, and I guarantee you all, the next Flesh and Blood set, in months from now, I guarantee you, every store across the United States is going to pre-order it. LSS is going to see record pre-order demand. Distributors are going to have to allocate because they can't fill all the orders. And guess what those distributors are going to do? They're going to look back and they're going to see, did that store order Flesh and Blood sets from the last 2, 3, 4, 5 sets? They're going to look at the history, just like distributors do with Pokemon, just like they do with Magic, Final Fantasy, everything. The same thing happens. Again, the reason I have all the Pokemon from, the bear market, because I didn't cut it back. And then when things went crazy now, that's why I'm able to get a good amount of Pokemon, is because they look at the history of who was there. When the markets change, who's there to support Flesh and Blood? Who was there supporting Pokemon? Who was there supporting Magic? Who was there buying the products? They know. There's historical data. They have data in historical records of what stores did what. So that's what's going on. Now, as far as Rudy's opinion of the whole thing and how to navigate this moving forward, I really don't have a good solution to this, because I know we're long enough in the video, no one's watching, because I didn't want to say this to the end of the video. Because people are going to ask me if I don't talk about it. So, okay, Rudy, you laid out what's going on. You explained the situation. So, Rudy, what's the solution? What would you do? What's the answer to this whole thing? Well, here's the problem, folks. And I know you're not going to want to hear this. And I know this is going to give me some nice little FU Rudy letters. And, but let me be honest, because somebody has to do it. And I feel like sometimes the only times people can be honest are the people that kind of are in that situation of, fuck it, right? And I feel like I'm one of the few people in that situation where I can say and do certain things, and even when people are mad at me, I just don't really care. I mean, I don't have sponsorships. I don't really have anything that can be canceled, I guess. I don't really know. So, in my opinion, I don't think there's much to do because I don't think there's a major problem. I'll say it one more time in a different way. If I was LSS and James, and all the little drama on social media and these stupid websites, which you shouldn't be on anyways because they waste your time and they take away the beauty of the real world, there's not really any major changes to make because I don't think it's a major problem. Yes, there are little problems, maybe medium size, and there's some tweaking that can be done. But on the overall topic of major issues with flesh and blood, which is what the internet wants you to think right now, I don't think it's a major problem. Therefore, I have no major advice. Sure, maybe they can tweak the print run, or maybe after release they can tell people, well, here's release, and then kind of what Pokemon will do is Pokemon releases a big new set, and then 3 months later, 6 months later, there'll be tiny little restocks. They'll hand out, Rudy, you got 7 or 8 pallets at release. Here's your one restock. Here's one pallet. That's it. Like, you can kind of do an extra little, kind of a little piggyback thing. I don't think would have a major impact, but you got to be careful because then when you do that, and you do that every set, everyone's going to know, well, I'm going to wait for those additional little drops to come. It'll change how people behave. That's the problem with doing that stuff. But, as far as the reprint stuff and the single cards and the Majestics and the power level, that's not my specialty. I am not a tier 1 hardcore pro organized play player. I never have been. I never was with Magic when I was younger. I played in tournaments and had fun. But I never tried to get the pro tours and world tour. I just enjoy the cards. I enjoy collecting cards. I enjoy investing in cards. I enjoy that being a part of my life. So as far as the mechanics and the gameplay and accessibility of the singles, I can just tell you this. I've always been a fan of designing new cards and going in new directions of design space. I always felt that was the better thing to do versus reprinting the same card. We need 20 reprints of the Tunic. Okay? I don't think reprinting the same card over and over is ever the correct choice, no matter what the internet machine of yelling at you is saying. I always believe the best thing to do is create new creative alternatives that make people say, man, should I run the Tunic? Or should I run this new one? If I did the new one, I could change these other cards now that have better synergy. So that makes me now shift away to a different play style. I always believed in that. Make the player have 2 or 3 powerful choices, not 1 or 2. That was always my brain for design space on that kind of stuff. But no, I don't think endlessly reprinting certain codexes or endlessly reprinting certain generic Majestics, reprinting certain gear, reprinting certain, I don't know. You get the idea. I don't think that's the best way to do it. It can help prices. Prices naturally, as your player base expands, prices naturally want to be pulled upwards because more people are acquiring cards and there's a certain finite amount of them. But at the same time, it gets a very complicated balancing act because if you keep reprinting things, well, the general public knows, hey, everybody be careful. Don't buy into this set because remember, they're going to reprint them all anyways in 6 months. So if you're going to do it, just be careful. Make sure you open the boxes. Make sure you hurry up and get them off the books because, everything's on a timer. Then it becomes a toxic thing. You got to see that you don't want to put people under the clock like that, So I think that's our flesh and blood conversation today. I think the summary of the video is, well, when something's doing really, really well, it brings on a new set of problems. But then depending who you are in that food chain is going to dictate whether or not you think it's a problem and how big of a problem you think it is. And is it really, print runs in flesh and blood are tight. The sets they're releasing are really good. The player base is definitely expanding again. Now, by what degree? A couple percent, 5%, double digit, 10% plus growth. I don't know. But there's definitely more demand and draw on the most recent sets. By far, from Misty, Rosetta into Hunted and obviously High Seas, the demand has been substantially higher compared to 1 and 2 years ago when I was selling, I don't know, Dynasty or Outsiders or Bright Lights or even Heavy Hitters at the beginning of last year. Beginning of last year, right? Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a different vibe to it. There's definitely more people demanding the product. So I think the comment section will be interesting on this video. Other than that, folks, thanks for watching. For the Flesh and Blood fans that stayed around to the end, let's see here. What do we have coming up? We do have some interesting Flesh and Blood little throwback sales with some leftover little promos. We're going to make some little variety kits. I don't want to tell you what it is. It'll be fun. It'll be for July and August. It'll be a lot of fun. Thanks for watching, folks. Have a beautiful day as always. Are we ending on a penis? We can end on the penis, right?